Welcome to the Cheating Infidelity. Did you know over 90% of our viewers don't subscribe? If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and hit that like button. We're targeting 500 likes on this one. Let's dive into today's tale.
I often find myself thinking about the past, about the choices I made, and how my life unfolded in ways I never thought possible. It wasn't always like this. I used to live with the belief that I had a perfect life, a loving husband, a peaceful home, and a routine that felt safe and comfortable. But sometimes life has a way of changing, of testing your resolve, of challenging the boundaries you've built around yourself. I suppose that's what happened to me. I was always a loyal wife. My husband, Michael, was a good man, hardworking, kind hearted, and devoted. We had been together for more than a decade, and our relationship at first felt like the perfect balance of friendship and love. We knew each other's quirks, our favorite songs, and even the way we preferred our coffee. But somewhere, amidst all the mundane routine of life, I began to feel something I hadn't anticipated: boredom. The kind of boredom that slowly eats away at your spirit. The kind that makes you question everything you thought you knew. It didn't happen overnight. At first, it was subtle. Michael and I would talk about our day, and while we would laugh and joke, there was an underlying tension that neither of us acknowledged. It wasn't about love. No, love was still there, but it was something more complex, something more difficult to name. I felt disconnected, like I was living in a parallel world where I wasn't entirely present. I began to long for something more, though I wasn't sure what that something was. And then there was Chris. Chris had been Michael's best friend since childhood. They had known each other through thick and thin, shared stories of their teenage years, and had always been there for each other. When we first got married, Chris became a regular presence in our lives. He would come over for dinner, join us for weekend outings, and as the years passed, he became almost like family. I never once thought of him in any way other than as Michael's best friend, someone who was part of our world in a very comfortable, platonic way. But as time went on, something began to shift. I noticed the way Chris looked at me. It wasn't obvious at first, but over time, it became undeniable. There was something in his eyes, a look of longing, of curiosity, that made me feel both flattered and uncomfortable at the same time. I didn't know how to process it, how to react. He wasn't overt, never said anything inappropriate, but there was a shift in the air when he was around. It was like an unspoken connection that neither of us could deny. At first, I brushed it off. I told myself that it was just my imagination, that maybe I was reading too much into things. After all, I loved my husband, and Chris was nothing more than a close friend. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that there was a growing attraction. It wasn't about physical desire, at least not at first. It was more about something deeper, something emotional. When Chris was around, I felt seen in ways I hadn't felt in a long time. There was an ease in our conversations, a connection that made me feel alive in ways I hadn't experienced in years. The turning point came on a rainy Friday evening. Michael had to work late, and Chris came over to keep me company. We ended up talking for hours, reminiscing about old times, laughing at jokes that no one else would understand. It felt easy, effortless, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was really living in the moment. But that night, something changed. Chris reached across the table and took my hand. The warmth of his touch sent a shiver down my spine, and for a moment, I forgot everything around me. It wasn't the touch of a friend. It was something more, something I couldn't ignore. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice soft, full of concern. I nodded, but inside I was anything but okay. I was confused. I didn't know what to make of the feelings that were stirring inside me, nor did I know how to process the way Chris was making me feel. I'd always prided myself on being a good wife, on being loyal to Michael. But in that moment, I found myself questioning everything. I withdrew my hand quickly, embarrassed by the moment that had passed. I'm fine, just a little tired. Chris didn't seem convinced, but he didn't press me. He just nodded and sat back in his chair, watching me closely. The silence between us was heavy, filled with unspoken words, with emotions neither of us was ready to confront. That night, Michael came home late, tired from a long day at work. He kissed me on the forehead, and I smiled, pretending that everything was okay. But deep down, I felt a growing distance between us, a chasm I couldn't bridge. I had started to wonder if the connection I had with Chris was something worth exploring, or if it was just a fleeting moment of desire that would fade with time. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't stop thinking about that night. I replayed every moment in my mind, trying to make sense of the feelings that had emerged. I knew I was treading dangerous waters, that I was walking a fine line between loyalty and temptation. But I couldn't shake the thought that something between Chris and me had changed forever. I tried to push the thoughts away, telling myself that I was being foolish. I loved Michael. I couldn't betray him. But with every passing day, I found myself growing more and more drawn to Chris. There was a magnetism between us, an unspoken bond that neither of us could deny. And the more I tried to fight it, the more I realized that I was losing the battle. The hardest part was the guilt, the constant gnawing feeling that I was betraying Michael, that I was doing something I couldn't take back. I loved him, but there was a part of me that needed more than just love. There was a part of me that needed to feel seen, needed to feel desired, and for the first time in years, I felt that way with Chris. I didn't know where this path would lead, but I knew one thing for sure. My life was never going to be the same. The days after that evening with Chris were filled with a restless tension that I couldn't seem to shake. I woke up every morning with a sense of anxiety, a gnawing feeling in the pit of my stomach, unsure of where my emotions were headed. I tried to convince myself that it was just a passing phase, a fleeting moment of weakness. But every time Chris and I crossed paths, every time our conversations took that deeper turn, the pull between us became undeniable. It wasn't that I didn't love Michael. I did. I loved him deeply, more than I had ever loved anyone. He had been my rock, my partner in everything. He had stood by me through thick and thin. Our life together was comfortable, predictable, and for the most part, happy. But there was a part of me, an ache that I couldn't ignore, that was longing for something more. It wasn't about Michael or Chris in isolation. It was about me. It was about what I had become. I realized I had been neglecting a part of myself for so long. Somewhere along the way, I had stopped living for me and had started living for others, living for Michael, living for the family we had built, for the life we had created. I had lost sight of who I was, what I wanted, and what I needed. And then, unexpectedly, I started finding pieces of myself in Chris. It wasn't love at first sight, but there was something in his presence that made me feel whole in a way that I hadn't felt in years. When Chris spoke to me, it was as if he saw me, really saw me. It wasn't just the surface level conversations that Michael and I often had. It was deeper. It was the way he listened to me when I spoke, the way he noticed the little things about me that Michael often overlooked. It was as if Chris was attuned to my every mood, my every word. And when we laughed together, I could feel the connection, the easy camaraderie, and a bond that for the first time in a long while made me feel alive. I tried to ignore it. I told myself that I was overthinking things, that it was all in my head. But it wasn't. Every moment I spent with Chris seemed to magnify the distance between Michael and me. And it wasn't just emotional, it was physical too. The intimacy we shared had faded, and I could sense it. Michael and I no longer touched each other the way we used to. We no longer held hands for no reason or kissed each other goodbye with the same enthusiasm we once had. Instead, we went through the motions of marriage, pretending that everything was fine, when in truth, both of us were just too tired to address the growing chasm between us. It was on another Friday night when the line between friendship and something more blurred, and I knew deep down that things would never go back to the way they were. Chris came over after dinner, and Michael was away on a business trip. It was just the two of us again, and there was something about the stillness of the evening that made everything feel more charged, more intense. We sat on the couch, and as usual, we talked about life, about work, about our past, about the things we had in common. The conversation flowed naturally, but tonight there was a subtle shift. It wasn't just our words that connected us, it was the unspoken tension that was growing between us. I could feel Chris's eyes on me, not in a way that made me uncomfortable, but in a way that made me aware of how different this felt. I was keenly aware of every movement, every shift in his body. When he reached for the remote control, his fingers brushed mine, and for a brief moment, the touch lingered. I could feel the warmth of his hand against mine, and my pulse quickened. I pulled my hand back quickly, but I didn't move away. I didn't want to break the moment. And that was the problem, wasn't it? I didn't want to move away. I didn't want to run from this strange connection that had blossomed between us. I wanted to explore it, to understand it, to see where it could lead. "Are you okay?" Chris asked again, his voice low and soothing. His gaze was steady, unwavering, as if he was waiting for me to say something, to acknowledge what was happening between us. I nodded, but my throat was tight. I wasn't sure what to say, what to do. My emotions were a whirlwind inside me. "Yeah, just a little tired," I lied again, this time feeling the weight of the words as they left my mouth. He didn't buy it. "You don't have to pretend with me, you know," he said quietly, leaning closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "I can tell when something's wrong." The sincerity in his voice caught me off guard, and for a moment I felt like I was being pulled into something I wasn't ready for, something I didn't fully understand. But the truth was, I wasn't sure if I wanted to pull away anymore. Part of me, a large part, wanted to give in to the desire that had been building up inside me for weeks. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional too. It was the way he made me feel understood, seen, and valued in a way I hadn't realized I was missing. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breath. "Chris," I said softly, "I don't know what's happening, but I feel confused about everything." He nodded slowly, his expression softening. "It's okay to feel that way. Life's complicated. Feelings are complicated." He shifted slightly, turning his body more toward mine, his eyes never leaving mine. "You don't have to figure it all out right now." For a moment, the silence between us stretched on, thick and heavy, as if we were both waiting for the other to make the next move. I didn't know what I expected from him. Maybe I expected him to pull back, to suggest that we stop whatever this was before it went any further. But Chris didn't pull away. He didn't make things awkward. Instead, he simply watched me, waiting for me to make the choice. And then, in an impulsive moment, I reached for him. I didn't think about the consequences. I didn't think about Michael or the guilt that I knew would follow. I just reached out, and Chris met me halfway, his lips brushing against mine gently at first. It was soft, tender, and hesitant, as though neither of us was quite sure what we were doing. But in that moment, nothing else seemed to matter. The world outside, the life I had built with Michael, everything faded into the background, and all that existed was the connection between Chris and me. I pulled back, breathless, my heart pounding in my chest. The reality of what had just happened hit me like a wave. I had crossed a line, and I couldn't take it back. But I didn't know if I wanted to. There was a part of me that felt exhilarated, that felt free in a way I hadn't in years. Chris, I don't know what to say, I whispered, my voice shaking. You don't have to say anything, he replied quietly, his gaze still intense. I just want you to know that whatever happens next, I'm here for you, no matter what. And in that moment, I realized that things had changed forever. There was no going back to the way it had been before, no pretending that everything was okay. The path I had started down was uncertain, and I had no idea where it would lead. But one thing was clear. I had crossed a line, and now I had to live with the consequences. In the days that followed, the weight of what had happened between Chris and me hung over me like a storm cloud that refused to dissipate. Each moment felt heavy, and every glance between us carried the weight of unspoken words. It wasn't just about the kiss, though. It was about everything that had led to that moment. The unspoken connection, the growing tension, the shift in my own heart. It was as though I had unlocked a door I could no longer close, and I had no idea how to navigate what lay on the other side. The guilt was suffocating. Michael had no idea, and I could barely look him in the eye without feeling like a fraud. He was still the same loving husband, the same man who had stood by me through everything. But every time I saw him, every time he kissed me or held me, the weight of my actions pressed down on me. I felt as though I was betraying not only him, but myself. I had crossed a line, and I didn't know how to make it right. At the same time, I couldn't deny the pull I felt toward Chris. The attraction was no longer something I could ignore. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional, too. Every time we were together, every time we spoke, I felt like I was finally being seen in a way that I hadn't in so long. With Chris, there was no pretending. He understood me in a way that Michael never could. There was an ease to being with him, a connection that felt natural and effortless. But the reality of our situation, the fact that he was Michael's best friend, made it all the more complicated. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to fix what I had broken, or if it could even be fixed. All I knew was that I was at a crossroads, and every path I looked down seemed to lead to even more pain and confusion. That Friday, Chris came over again. Michael was working late, and I knew I couldn't keep avoiding him. I knew that I had to confront what had happened and figure out what I was going to do next. When the doorbell rang, I felt a sense of dread. I opened the door, and there he was, standing on the other side, a quiet smile on his face. "Hey," he said softly, his gaze searching mine for any sign of what I was feeling. "Hi," I replied, stepping aside to let him in. The air between us felt charged, like static electricity just before a storm. I didn't know what to say, so we stood there for a moment in awkward silence, just looking at each other. "Are you okay?" Chris asked after a beat, his voice gentle. I nodded, but I didn't feel okay. I felt everything at once: guilt, longing, confusion, and I didn't know how to process it. "I've been thinking a lot about everything," I said, my voice faltering. "Yeah, me too," he said quietly, stepping closer. His presence was comforting, but it also made everything more complicated. "I didn't mean for things to go this far, but they did," I finished for him, my heart racing. I knew where this conversation was going, and I wasn't sure I was ready for it. But I had to be. I had to face it, because avoiding it was just making everything worse. "I don't want to hurt you or Michael," he said, his eyes sincere. "I never intended for this to happen, but I don't want to keep pretending like everything is fine when it's not." "I don't know what to do," I whispered, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "I love Michael. I don't want to hurt him, but I don't know how to ignore what I feel for you." Chris reached out and took my hand, his touch warm and steady. You don't have to make any decisions right now. I'm not asking you to leave Michael or choose me. I just want you to be honest with yourself. You have to figure out what you really want. What makes you happy? I pulled my hand away, feeling a wave of emotion threaten to overwhelm me. I don't even know what makes me happy anymore. I feel like I've been so focused on everyone else, on being the wife, the friend, the daughter, that I forgot about me. I don't know what I want, and I'm scared of what happens if I find out. Chris didn't say anything for a moment, just watched me carefully, his expression full of understanding. You don't have to have all the answers right now, but you owe it to yourself to figure it out. And you owe it to Michael, too. He deserves the truth. I wanted to believe that. I really did. But the truth felt too painful, too much to bear. I had spent so many years building my life with Michael that the thought of tearing it all apart seemed unimaginable. But could I keep living a lie? Could I keep pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't? I didn't know. That night, after Chris left, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling lost. I thought about Michael, about all the years we had spent together, and how much I cared about him. But I also thought about the connection I had with Chris, the way he made me feel alive again, seen in a way that I hadn't been in years. It wasn't about love, not at first, but now, as I reflected on everything, I realized that it had become about more than that. It had become about desire, about something that had been missing from my life for so long. I knew I couldn't keep living in this state of uncertainty. I had to make a choice, but I didn't know how to make that choice or what the consequences would be. I had no idea what would happen if I confronted Michael, if I told him the truth. Would he forgive me? Could he understand? Or would I lose everything I had built? The next few days were a blur. I went through the motions of life, pretending to be the wife Michael thought I was, the friend Chris thought I was. But inside, I was torn apart. I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't keep pretending like everything was okay when it wasn't. And then, one evening, Michael came home early. He walked in the door, looking tired but happy, and kissed me on the forehead like he always did. But this time, something in his gaze made me stop. He was looking at me differently, as though he could see through the mask I had been wearing. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like he knew. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice low, full of concern. I hesitated, the words stuck in my throat. But then, something inside me snapped. I couldn't keep hiding, couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. I had to be honest, for both our sakes. "No," I said quietly, my voice breaking. "I'm not okay. I've been hiding something from you, Michael. I've been lying to you, and I can't do it anymore." Michael's expression faltered, and his brow furrowed. "What do you mean? What are you talking about?" I took a deep breath, gathering the strength I needed to say the words that had been haunting me for so long. "I've been feeling something for Chris, and I don't know what it means, but I know I can't keep it from you." The silence between us was deafening, and I could feel the weight of the truth hanging in the air. Michael didn't say anything for what felt like an eternity. His face was unreadable, and my heart ached as I waited for his response. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. "I don't know what to say." And I didn't either, but I knew that whatever happened next, things could never go back to the way they were. The truth had come out, and now we both had to face it. I didn't know what the future held, whether I would lose Michael or if there was any way to repair the damage I had caused. But in that moment, I knew that I had taken the first step toward being honest with myself, even if it meant breaking everything apart. I wasn't sure if I could fix what was broken, but I was finally ready to try.